And good afternoon, Summa Scholars. Here we are again on the Beaver Galleon, going into question 23, finishing up Article 4, moving into Article 5, which is a pretty long article. Let's get into it. For his will, by which, and this is the end, page 256, still going into the respondio, I answer that part of Article 4. For his will, by which loving he wishes good to someone, is the cause of that good possessed by some in preference to others. Thus it is clear that love precedes election in the order of reason, and election precedes predestination, whence all the predestined are objects of election and love. Now, remember what I said, just get the word predestination out of your mind. It's too confusing after John Calvin came and muddled all the waters of this. Think of the etymology of the word predestination. Pre, to happen before, and destined, to determine something. Like I determine how I want the show to end when I put on the show with Sideshow Tramps or in my solo project. I have a predetermined way that I want the show to end. So we'll just use the term predetermined. God's will, by which in loving he wishes good to someone, is the cause of that good possessed by some in preference to others. The preference to others part is not about the predetermined part, that he's determining who is damned and who is not. It's the state of beatitude is the final cause, and that God's will is the actual goodness. Remember yesterday he talked about how our will is moved by things we see, and then we are drawn into love, either love of a song or love of a woman or a man or whatever the thing is. But with God, it is not that way. He is not led into love, but his will is love. So again, for his will, by which in loving he wishes good to someone, is the cause of that good possessed. By some, remember the set of some is those who choose it, by those who choose it in preference to others. The others are those who don't choose it. Thus it is clear that love precedes election in the order of reason, and election precedes predestination. Those are elect who call out upon anyone who calls in the name of the Lord Jesus shall be saved, with all the other realities of coming into contact and love with God. But the whole point is, the thing that you need to focus on is predetermined that we should have beatitude and share in his life. Those who choose it and those who don't. And the degree to which we choose it are how these preferences and orders manifest in our eternity. Reply to objection uno. If the communication of the divine goodness in general is considered, God communicates his goodness without election, inasmuch as there is nothing which does not in some way share in his goodness, as was said above in question 6. But if we consider the communication of this or that particular good, he does not allot it without election, since he gives certain goods to some men, which he does not give to others. Thus, in the conferring of grace and glory, election is implied. Just like I said yesterday, God has all this glory and all this beauty to manifest, and some he manifests as black man, some he manifests as white man, Asian man. He has all this glory and beauty. He's doling it out. He's sharing it with all of us in different ways. Some are tall, some are short, some are naturally good at athletics, some are not. But all of these sparks of the divine glory are manifested in us, and each one receives it according to his capacity. So that is that's the election. And in the set of elect, since we are human beings with free will, our free will is caught up into it, as he'll talk about later in the next article, is caught up into this whole election process and is working with God. All right, let's move on. Objection 2, Thomas going after Larry, Ralph. When the will of the person choosing is incited to make a choice by the good already pre-existing in the object chosen, the the choice must needs be of those things which already exist, as happens in our choice. There has to be something that exists for you to see it and start falling in love with it and choose it. In God, it is otherwise, as we have said. It doesn't have to exist, and he doesn't move towards it because he is ipsum esse, existence itself, and that existence is love. Thus, Augustine says, those are chosen by God who do not exist, yet he does not err in his choice. Deep within him, he already knows, he has already chosen you by the very fact that you are created. And that choice is towards your beatitude and complete glory. And if someone chooses not to have that, there's another state of affairs in store for them, which is called reprobate or damnation or something like that. All by our choice. Reply to objection 3. God wills all men to be saved by his antecedent will, which is to will not simply but relatively, and not by his consequent will, which is to will simply. Again, that's why it says relatively. It's related to the choice that we're all making. Hey, we got 2 people in here. Good to see you guys. What is kind of exciting is thinking about the community growing. And yesterday I realized I made a mistake when I said Patreon. Actually, I think we're going to do this thing through Locals. So if you went to Locals and typed in Craig Kinsey or Google search Craig Kinsey Locals, my Locals page should come up and you would be able to support the channel. And it's not only, the Locals thing's not only going to help Daily Summa, that is going to also help music, all of the other art projects, YouTube channel that's coming, and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to be a supporter of the arts and a supporter of Summa teaching, you can go to Locals, 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 and type in Craig Kinsey, and I think it should come up. Let me know if it doesn't. Article 5, whether the foreknowledge of merits is the cause of predestination. Whether the foreknowledge of our merits is the cause of predestination. Of course it's not going to be, but let's see. It seems that foreknowledge of merits is the cause of predestination, so says Larry, and we know Larry doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's given it a try. For the apostle says, and this is still Larry objecting to St. Thomas's position, for as the apostle says, whom he foreknew, he also predestined. Again, a gloss of Ambrose on Romans 9 says, I will have mercy upon whom I will have mercy, says the Lord, or says, and I will give mercy to him who I foresee. I will turn to me with his whole heart. Therefore, it seems that foreknowledge of merits is the cause of predestination. That's kind of the convoluted thinking that we had with John Calvin. And I can see how you could get confused on that, especially from this scripture. But Thomas is going to straighten it all out. By the way, Article 5 is pretty lengthy, and we won't even finish it today. So you're going to get you a little cliffhanger. But remember what we're doing here, folks. We're taking a pause in our day from all the doom scrolling and all the outside. And we're watching a flow of argument, which is catechesis, learning more about your faith. And even if you don't learn anything, you're hearing it. And you're hearing Thomas's reasoned arguments. And you're seeing the fun of his disputing with Ralph and Larry and all the other beavers on the galleon. It's a drama. It's a story that we check into in the Daily Summa once a day and get our minds off the distractions and just come for catechesis and camaraderie to be all together. Right now, we have a very small community. There's 2 people here right now watching it live. There's other people who watch it later. But in the future, prayerfully see the future where I'll be sitting in a room with 100 people, 10 people, 1,000 people, and we'll all be together, and there'll be more chat, and we'll be able to talk more. That's something that could happen in the future, especially with local support. All right, let's move on through the objections, and then we'll see Thomas's answer. Objection 3, further, there is no injustice in God. Okay, now it would seem unjust that unequal things be given to equals. But all men are equals as regards both nature and original sin, true, and inequality in them arises from the merits or demerits of their actions, okay? Therefore, God does not prepare unequal things for men by predestinating and reprobating, unless through the foreknowledge of their merits and demerits. These are tricky little answers. tricky little questions. And again, this is showing how John Calvin got messed up, because these questions can be a little difficult. Let's see how Thomas gets it. And again, I'm sorry to tell you, there's a cliffhanger, because he starts in this, I answer that. He is actually not answering it yet. He's giving different ideas that people have had through history. And then tomorrow he's going to answer it. Can you be patient? Do you have any patience anymore after scrolling and getting everything we want immediately? Can we wait till tomorrow? On the contrary, the apostle says, not by works of justice, which we have done, but according to his mercy, he saved us. That's the argument from authority. So we have to have something that all of these scriptures that were mentioned before in the objections, which seem so confusing, we have to be able to jibe them. The science has to work out. The skia, the breaking it apart, but it has to come back together like a Rubik's Cube or a puzzle. And part of the puzzle piece that makes everything wompy is Titus 3:5, that says, not by works of justice which we have done, but according to his mercy he saved us. So how do we jibe those two concepts? It's by mercy, nothing we have done, and also there are merits and things we do and have to do. That's where the heresies get mixed up. That's where you start having either far Protestant, evangelical, or double predestination stuff, or you get extra works that were saved by works on the other far side. So we're going to have to integrate these scriptures scientifically, as Thomas would say at the beginning. We have to put them together and see how they can fit together, and that's what Thomas is going to do for us. Let's go to the logical answer. I answer that. Since predestination includes will, as was said above in Article 4, the reason of predestination must be sought for in the same way as was the reason of the will of God. Now it was shown above in question 19, Article 5, that we cannot assign any cause of the divine will on the part of the act of willing, but a reason can be found on the part of the things willed, inasmuch as God wills one thing on account of something else. That's a lot there. Essentially, we're saying God's heart and will knew what he wanted when he created us, and then we're cooperating in that with our free will. Inasmuch as God wills one thing on account of something else. He wills you on account of your mother and father. Everything is being ordered towards beatitude, but in this space-time, one thing is for the sake of another. The plant, the seed going in for the sake of the tree, for the sake of the fruit that's coming, for the sake of the feeding of the little animal that eats the fruit, for the sake of the man who eats the animal, and life goes on in this topsy-turvy space-time ship, galleon that we're on. Wherefore, nobody has been so insane as to say that merit is the cause of divine predestination as regards the act of the predestinator. Listen to Thomas using the word, nobody's been so insane. I love it that we had earlier Thomas going, that exploded the argument. And now Thomas is like, nobody's been so insane as to say that merit is the cause of divine predestination as regards the act of the predestinator, which is God. But this is the question, whether, as regards the effect, predestination has any cause, or what comes to the same thing, whether God preordained that he would give the effect of predestination to anyone on account of any merits. He's just restating the question. He's saying that the question is it merits that causes predestination? Accordingly, which the answer is no. Accordingly, there were some, and here's where he goes on a reel talking about what some people have taught. Accordingly, there were some who held that the effect of predestination was preordained for some on account of pre-existing merits in a former life. Wait, what? We're going into like, what do they call that when you're reborn? You guys know and are yelling it at the screen right now. Reincarnation. What? Is that what he's going into now? Not quite. This was the opinion of Origen, who thought that the souls of men were created in the beginning, and according to the diversity of their works, different states were assigned to them in this world when united with the body. He's saying that Origen was saying that God knew what people would do in their life, And so he created their soul according to what he knew they would be like, which is a bit convoluted, but let's move on. For when they were not yet born, and then now he's quoting Romans, for when they were not yet born, nor had done any good or evil, not of works, but of him that calleth, it was said of her, the elder shall serve the younger. This is Romans. It says of her. I wonder if that's right. Because the elder shall serve the younger was in regards to Jacob and Esau. It should have been him. I'll have to look that up, but anyway, it's not super important. The important point is he's talking about what he says was Origen's idea, that God's foreknowledge of what someone would do creates that soul in a certain way. So in some sense, we did act before our creation. It gets into crazy theology now. But he's just setting that up as one option. He's going to answer it later. Others said that pre-existing merits in this life are the reason and cause of the effect of predestination. Pre-existing merits in this life. For the Pelagians thought that the beginning of doing well came from us and the consummation from God, so that it came about that the effect of predestination was granted to one and not to another, because the one made a beginning by preparing, whereas the other did not. But against this, we have the saying of the apostle in 2 Corinthians 3:5, that we are not sufficient to think anything of ourselves as of ourselves. Now, no principle of action can be imagined previous to the act of thinking. You have to know before you can do. Wherefore, it cannot be said that anything begun in us can be the reason of the effect of predestination. Again, guys, any of these topics could be spoken on for a long period of time. Remember what we're here for, so you don't get frustrated. I don't want you to get frustrated when you don't understand every little detail of this. We could spend probably a month more on this one little paragraph, or talking about Origen and exploring what Origen did say, and then going back and reading what he did say, and then seeing if Thomas was right in what he thought Origen was saying, and what the minuscule grammar of these words. You could spend a great deal of time going more and more deeply into each of these concepts. But that's not what we're doing here. We're doing a daily Summa, a daily read through, so that our mind's in the game, so that we're stimulated and not just doom scrolling, and so that we're thinking of other questions and things you can go to your coffee shop and cigar lounge and sit with your wife at night and ask questions. What do you think that meant? What do you think? Do you know any scriptures that would contradict that? And you can spend your time talking about catechesis and having camaraderie. Remember, that's what we're doing here. This is a daily meditation. It's not a daily figure out every answer to everything. Good luck with that in life. All right, here we go. We're finishing up. We only have this little bitty bit left, and then we're done for today. And so others said that merits following the effect of predestination are the reason of predestination, giving us to understand that God gives grace to a person and preordains that he will give it, because he knows beforehand that he will make good use of that grace. As if a king were to give a horse to a soldier because he knows he will make good use of it, but some other soldier would be inept, and so he doesn't give the other soldier a good horse. That's not what Thomas is teaching. He's setting up all the possibles that people have said throughout history, ideas. That what predestination is God knew that some people would make good use of it, so he starts giving them grace, just like the horse to the soldier. But this seems to have drawn a distinction between that which flows from grace and that which flows from free will. Here's the key: as if the same thing cannot come from both. Remember, our free will is working, God's providence is working. The predestination is, remember, it's determining beforehand the end result, which is beatitude. You have to keep that in mind, or this all will stop making even the little bit of sense it might now. It, however, manifests that what is of grace, it is, however, manifest that what is of grace is the effect of predestination, which is beatitude. And this cannot be considered as the reason of predestination, since it is contained in the notion of predestination, which is contained in the notion of God's love, which is contained in the notion of the telos of all things, what God's desire is to share beatitude with us, which mind-blowingly, heart-blowingly, beatitude is not something God created. Beatitude is sharing in his very life. And so he's sharing himself with us, which you can give no more than yourself. That's why when he wanted to create a metaphor, he created human sexual relations and the marital act and the giving that creates new life, where you're sharing your very self, your DNA, and then creating a third person, which is the divine Trinity, a metaphor, a living metaphor in our bodies of the divine Trinity. Guys, that was it for today. Remember, all this is straw. Go pray, go meditate, and as always, that's so weird when that finger comes up there like that. As always, it looks like E.T. All right, guys, have a good one. Peace to you. Go pray.